Everyone's in? That's good. Okay. Our next speaker is Stewart Skinner. Stewart's going to talk to us about, I think, a difficult topic, but an important topic. When Stewart returned to the family farm after university, he was eager to put what he had learned into practice. However, soon after the farm experienced hard times. There were heavy financial pressures, and Stewart became increasingly distressed and depressed. He was going down a dark path of hopelessness when he decided to reach out and get help. Now he's back farming and doing well and putting several strategies in place to help him cope with the stresses of farming. Today, Stewart and his wife, Jessica Kelly, bravely share their story of recovery from those dark times in hopes of helping others. Stewart's story is one that is all too common in agriculture. We found that one last year when we had Andrea Jones-Bitten speak on how stressful farming is on mental health. We weren't too sure what the audience reaction would be, but we found out it struck a chord, and really pleased how it turned out. And I think this has been a common theme in a bunch of farm conferences in the last year and a half, and people really receiving it well. With that, I'm going to get you to join me in welcoming Stewart to the stage.
Thank you, Archie.
Thank you.
I just have to get my timer going here because I know I'm the only one between salesman and beer, so I don't want to take too much time on you. I know I saw one face in the crowd that's been in one of my mental health talks here, so I apologize. Some of this stuff is a bit, I'm trying to blend things and learn as I go. I'm a pig farmer. I am not a speaker, especially when it comes to mental health. I'm just kind of learning as I go. One thing I would say before I get started, I do talk about some tough times in my life. If at any point you're feeling uncomfortable or you just don't want to be in the room anymore, feel free to leave. You're not going to offend me. I guess I've just given you your out if you want to get out of here early too. So I call this one the There and Back Again, A Farmer's Tale. Any Lord of the Rings fans in the crowd? There we go. Thank you. Oh, I have never had that emphatic of a response to a question about... But anyway, so just like Bilbo, we're going to go on a bit of an adventure here. Whoa, dear, wrong button. Then things started to kind of come back down again. And so two things were going on at this point. We had already expanded. I was the one in charge of a new sow herd. And to be honest, I didn't really have a lot of experience with sows. But I just felt like, if I'm going to do this pig farming thing, I've got to do it. I got to figure this out. And we started burning through cash. And we started burning through a lot of cash. And throughout the summer of 2012, those financial stressors for me acted as a bit of a trigger. And it's really hard to, I guess, maybe articulate how those can kind of all roll together in a bit of a ball of wax, if you will. But to talk about, again, sticking with my Hobbit theme, the Battle of the Five Armies, mental health just has a tough way of just, when it explodes, it can come at you at a lot of different ways. And so throughout the summer, what we found, and my wife was kind of the main point of contact in witnessing this, and then beyond that, I was doing a pretty good job of hiding it from the outside world. I became incredibly volatile with my mood swings. I'm an emotional Scotsman at the best of days, so when I'm in a bad mental place, my temper can be up here, and so I found that to get worse. I had a lot of personal self-worth issues because along with the financial challenges, I learned I'm a really shitty sow producer. I'm just not very good at it. I'm not patient. I'm not good at heat detection. I'm not good at a lot of things that are kind of at the core of being a good sow person. But instead of saying, okay, I'm not good at this, can I educate myself and get better? Or I'm not good at this, I need to be looking at other things. It kind of manifested as, I'm an idiot. I'm no good. And it really started damaging my self-worth. And that kind of, it bleeds into a bit of a crisis of confidence, if you will. This bullet point, the pain of rationality, what I mean by that is, even when I was in the midst of a very dark, depressive episode, this is the one thing that I'm going to talk about now. There was a morning in December, and this is really when it was. The summer had gone on. Things had not gotten better. In fact, they had gotten far worse. And our family wasn't entirely sure how we were going to pay the feed bill each month. I was convinced that it was my fault, that I was the reason that I was going to take down or destroy everything my parents had built. And the pain that came along with all of these things was really hard to work through. And something that I got asked last fall when I was doing an interview with someone is, why would you ever want to kill yourself? Why would you want to end it that way? And the only answer that I've been able to come up with, it's not that you don't want to be alive, or at least in my case. It's not that I didn't want to be alive anymore. It's that I wanted to escape that unrelenting pain. I wanted to escape the pain of being scared to go into my bedroom and go to bed with my wife at night. I wanted to get rid of that pain, and I knew no other way to get rid of that pain. So in December, I never wrote it down on a calendar for some reason, but we think it was December 12th. No one wrote it down on a calendar. It was a morning. It was cold. It was snowy. And I was in the barn, and I was trying to figure out how to hang myself. And I had an extension cord. I'll never forget, it was orange. And I was walking through. I was worried that the flex augers would break and it wouldn't work, and so I was trying to figure out how to hang myself. And I don't know why. I mean, I have my own personal thoughts on maybe why, but I had a little voice that it just said, Stewart, don't do this. Don't do this today. And I'm forever thankful that that little voice showed up. And that little voice, all it said was, don't do this, ask for help. And I called my parents that morning, and I said, you got to get to the barn right now. And I like to joke, they made a 45-minute drive in about 15 minutes that morning. And it was at that moment that I was reminded of what unconditional love is. My parents were going to love me regardless of what happened at the farm. My family was going to love me. My wife was going to love me. And that didn't fix everything. But at least I understood that farming, well, it's lovely and wonderful, and I still love being involved in it. It is not everything. And there are still going to be these people that love me. So that's the kind of I've hit rock bottom. Wrong button. We decided to get into niche market production. Although after hearing the gentleman from down south, I'm in the wrong niche markets, I think. But one of the things that drew me to niche market production for hogs is it smoothed out the booms and the busts a little bit, because our contracts are based off of our cost of production. I like to joke, and sorry if I'm offending any supply management folks in here, we've got the benefits of supply management without the quota bill. That usually gets a laugh. Maybe there's more supply managed guys in here than I thought. But we decided to get into that so that we could remove some of the things that caused me anxiety. For a grain trader, or someone who worked as a grain trader, I was not good at risk management. It still kind of befuddles me, which I don't understand why. I should be able to figure it out, but I've never been able to. I'm much happier troubleshooting a problem in a barn of grow-finish hogs than I am trying to figure out what the suit in Chicago is going to do. And so that's why we looked at niche markets. We also, another thing that we decided, I think too often we worry about trying to farm like we think others think we should farm. Now, I'm guessing perhaps this room doesn't fall victim to that as much as others. Oh, I better check my time here. Oh, dear, I got to hustle up. All right. But we decided to build a farm a bit differently, and we do it predominantly with contract barns. I don't have to go to the same place every day. But what we found was, let's build a business that fits who we are versus what society or other farmers think we should be. I am never going to rise out of bed and take over the world at 4:30 in the morning. I might be up at 2 at night or 2 in the morning looking at Excel spreadsheets, but that's what I enjoy doing. And so we decided, let's be ourselves. And then I go back to talking about finding my happiness. And for me, something that's really important on the happiness front, And one thing I would hope to maybe leave with you here today is work at decoupling professional successes and failures from how you derive your happiness. That's a lot easier to do when times are good. But I think for me, that's something I really try to bang that into my head with regularity. Don't let your business be your only source of happiness, because there's a lot of ways that you can find happiness and it doesn't cost you. And for me, it's mostly family with a side dressing of friends. And that's something that was really important for me, because it took a long time for me to discover that. So, little disclaimer here. I'm not a doctor. And I figured with Doogie Howser here, we could get at least a couple different age demographics. But I found a quote from an actual doctor who's also born and raised on a Canadian farm. There's a lot of people in the agricultural community who experience stress, depression, and anxiety. But resiliency is their ability to overcome these, move forward, and continue to do what they love and farm. Wrap up here. Jess and I work really, really hard at communicating. And I'm going to say it again, but I am so blessed to have the support system I have. Something that we have found that works for us so far is when I feel my anxiety starting to come on or get a little bit too out of control, I call my wife and I say, Jess, I'm going to need a little bit of alone time. And then in the next, whether it's that day or within the next couple days, Jess makes plans to give me a night by myself. And I don't know why, but for some reason that one night of quiet, whether it's just watching a little bit of Netflix or playing some video games or just sleeping for 12 hours, for me, that helps reset my clock. That's an early warning signal that has worked for us. So I would encourage you to think about your own early warning signals. When you see things coming on or you start to feel, what are things you can do to head it off at the pass before it really blows up on you? I also learned what works today may not work tomorrow. So just because that strategy works today, just don't assume that it'll work tomorrow. And really work at communicating with the people that you love, the people that are closest to you, so that you can help continually evolve those strategies. And then, this is a pretty important one, never think you have everything figured out, or it will hit you in the back of the head so hard that you'll be spinning. So those are just a couple tips on resiliency. And I close every conversation I do about mental health with this quote, because I haven't talked a lot about how I feel about agriculture. Raising food for people still sets my soul on fire. The thing where I feel happiest about is I've figured out a way, or I shouldn't say figured out a way, because now I'm sounding like I got it all figured out. We have identified, at least for us right now, what works so that we can still do what sets our soul on fire. And always, I find that kind of that internal burn, it can, as long as you harness it positively, it can really help work through a lot of problems. And then one little, add-on to that piece, and this came up because I had a conversation with a farmer in Charlottetown yesterday. Last year they had 3 farmers take their own lives in Charlottetown. In PEI, not a very large province. And all of them were men over 50. And Scott and I talked about, especially as we're going through generational transfer, there can often be upheaval around what's my role, what's my purpose. I know my dad and I right now, we have that conversation regularly because we are doing some succession stuff, and Dad has fear about what will be my purpose. So that's something that you can also be willing to let that soul adapt and find new things. But with that, and hopefully I haven't gone too far over time on you, thank you for bringing me here today to talk about this. I hope you were able to take something away from it. I've been overwhelmed with the change that we have seen in agriculture over the last year and a half, 2 years on mental health. Because even in 2012, I had a lot of people look at me pretty sideways when I said I'm leaving the farm. And I think that first step has been made. We're willing to talk about it now. We're willing to say it's okay to get help. The next step is at an individual level. It's okay to get help. There is nothing wrong with getting help. And we've seen amazing progress, whether it's the Do More Agriculture Foundation out west. There's a group in Ontario. Well, Andrea Jones-Bitton is doing a lot of work, and she's partnered up. Actually, just recently it's become public that a dairy farmer outside of Kingston has built a program that I've actually done already, a bit of a mental health first aid, and they've done something out east as well, and then in Quebec. So the resources are starting to be developed, and that's exciting. That's really, really exciting. So with that, I want to thank you very much for bringing me here today. I hope you enjoyed it, or at least were able to take something from it. I don't know if we have time for a question or two. I'll leave that to the organizing folks.
Yeah, we do have time for a question or two. Willing to open it up to the floor here. If someone has a question they'd like to ask of Stewart. I may have a question for you then, Stewart. When you were in Africa, those people made a big impact on you. What impact do you think you made on them during that time?
Well, one of the things, and I'm actually headed back there in a couple weeks. We've been there a few times now. We work with a group of farmers in that region, and what we've been able to do is, in 2015, actually, there's a group called Kenyan Kids Foundation that's based outside of Kitchener, Ontario. They work together with Gay Lee, the dairy cooperative, and they provided interest-free loans to 2 farmer co-ops to build milk bulk tanks or milk distribution centers, and that's had an amazing impact. So when I was there in 2013, everybody was selling milk to a guy on a bicycle at the end of the road. And when we were back last time, and they had just started to bulk milk, now there's over 1,000 farmers delivering milk to those centers every day. And the other amazing thing that's done is, just like farmers here, sometimes you've got lots of inventory, maybe not so much cash. The co-op has allowed farmers to use milk as a currency. So secondary school isn't covered for Kenyan students. The co-op will actually pay the school fees, and then do a milk check-off throughout the year. So little things like that I think, but I'll always say they have given me far more than I could ever hope to give there. I'm going to keep going back. I've found that, at least right now, again, this is something that works right now, and I like to tease my wife, that, if you take a year's worth of therapy, or you just buy a plane ticket every 18 months or so, what's the difference? And I found, but that's what works for me. So yeah, we're my dad and my brother and I, as well as Jen Christie, who grew up on a dairy farm outside of Tara, Ontario, are headed back in March, and we're going to be trying to replicate the dairy model, but with poultry. We're going to do a pilot project with poultry production. So yeah.
Awesome. We do have a question that came from the floor here. You were talking about in your hard times you could go to your wife and here's my signal that I need some me time. Does she have some type of signal for you too?
Well, and actually, one thing that Jess and I have worked at, because as I was saying, I'm the emotional one. My wife is just like, I don't know how she keeps her on the rails. One thing, though, that we have worked on is she's gotten better at pushing back on me. And it's more of a conversation. Instead of me just being like, Jess, I need some alone time. And she says, all right, away I go. She'll say, well, do you need alone time or do you want some alone time? And so we've really worked at she's worked at pushing back at me to make sure that we're going in the right direction. Now, one thing I will say, though, when we were going through that really dark, depressive period, my wife actually saw a therapist regularly just to talk about how to live with somebody that was dealing with mental health. Because she'll talk about, when she went to work in the morning, she didn't know if I was going to be alive at the end of the day. And that really weighed on her. I'll often get questions about, how can we tell that someone is suffering? How, as an outsider, can we tell? And I think that one of the challenges for people, especially someone that maybe has lost a close friend to suicide, is you can spend a lifetime asking yourself why or what could I have done, and you're never going to get the answers that you're seeking from that. In terms of working with people that when you're still alive, I think that the biggest thing that a person can do is showing that they are accepting and they're willing to listen. I do think that, in terms of grower versus supply, how many people are from the supply industry in here? Or most of you growers? Okay. So I think that folks in the supply industry have a really unique role to play because sometimes you have as much contact with a farmer as anybody else. And I talk to my feed salesman at least once a week or so, just to touch base and talk about what's going on. So I think especially for folks that are in that supply industry, you have a really unique opportunity that if you've got a person you've worked with for years, you get to know them pretty well. And you can see maybe if they're not feeling well. And I would argue that you'd be better off to ask that question, are you okay? And then they say, I'm fine. You say, well, are you really okay? You're better off to ask those questions than not. And I would really encourage for organizations to look at actually training their salespeople with some mental health first aid. So for instance, like I did a mental health first aid course, which I did essentially a pilot version of what's been launched now here in Ontario. Our vet clinic they brought in a blend. There were 3 or 4 farmers, a couple vet professionals, and then a couple people from the feed industry. I think that the corporate world has a really interesting role to play in help building informal support, because we're still going to deal with that stigma of not wanting to go to talk to a psychiatrist or talk to a therapist. But I certainly don't have a stigma with talking to my sales folks or like my support people. And I think you've got that ready-made conduit of trust. So don't be afraid to try to grow your capacity within your organizations that you can help your growers.
Yes.
So I think for me it's more of like how long is the fuse, and the fuse. So that's a very insightful question. So a couple weeks ago, when it got really cold, I forgot to do something, and an employee forgot to do something, and the result was a barn that was -4 and has now got brand new plumbing. Well-adjusted, well-grounded, in a really good mental place, Stewart can take that kind of a stressor and say, well, okay, probably shouldn't have let that happen, but here's how we're fixing it, and let's just drive on. Not as great a mental place or lower capacity, Stewart flies off and a stream of obscenities fly out. And so I don't know if that directly answers your question. It's not so much specific things, it's just more how much capacity do you have for stressors. And then Jess will talk about if I'm in a really bad place, like the anger, it can be about nothing. So it can get influenced, but it's more kind of the fuse, if that answers it.
Thank you. I think we'll wrap up questions there. Join me in thanking Stewart for a great presentation. We have a few things just as we wrap up this part of the afternoon. There's going to be a break now until our dinner banquet. It's going to be a cash bar out in the atrium. One thing that's always important to get us back in